Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, March 1st. Feels good to flip the calendar to a new month, especially given the prolonged winter we've been dealing with here in Wisconsin. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris, and it feels like baseball season is actually just around the corner. We've got spring games on TV, got games on the radio. We've got drafts starting up. TGFBI started today. I'm in a league similar to the Barf League that Eno is in. It's called GLARF. It's the Great Lakes version of that. So a Midwest league. That's a slow draft that started up. Our friends over at Prospects Live have a Best Ball Dynasty slow draft that started up today. So I have 3 slow drafts that all started today. And of course, the chaos of everything else for the season descending upon us too. How's it going for you on this Monday, Eno?
It was good. Chaos, scattered thoughts, trying to get in front of a draft widget and remember what team it was and what's going on and what the settings were and where your auction calculator tab is for that one and it's beautiful. It's beautiful watching Matt. I don't even know his first name. Somebody named Shoemake. Just grounded out against somebody named McCarthy. So
that's what you want.
I'm a fan. Listen, I'm a fan of names on the back of jerseys because there's a lot of players in baseball, and in spring in particular, there's so many more that I don't have, I don't have the patience to get like the media guide for every single team and be like, okay, number 69 is So anyway, that's life right now. I'm on the clock right now. You are on the clock.
Well, this is a good reminder to anybody out there who is in a slow draft to mute the tab if you are working in an office again. Fantrax in particular notoriously has the loud air horn on by default. Like the NFBC sound kind of sounds like an announcement's going to be made on an airplane. It's just it's very soft, very pleasant. And then there's the "you are on the clock," right? That happens on a few different rooms.
You are on the clock.
But the hard air horn sound on Fantrax will make you jump and will surprise you and will embarrass you, as our friend Vlad Sedler pointed out, if you are in a meeting when that thing goes off.
Let this also be proof that sometimes when you're waiting on someone to make their pick, they're just out there podcasting.
Also that.
They're just, not doing their pick. They're just get out of the booth, make your pick.
I've got
you
have
to have some
chance.
patience, man. These 2 4-hour segments, sometimes they'll take the whole 4 hours. Sometimes I forgot to put auto on. I'm on the West Coast, I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry they had to wait the 2 hours, but I think we'll get the draft done.
There's a little bit of etiquette in the slow draft too. The TGFBI league I'm in, Jeff Zimmerman's in it. He's got the 9th pick. I'm picking 11th. He's planning on picking Shane Bieber, and Shane Bieber is about to make his Cactus League debut. So he chatted the room and just said, I've got a few hours on the clock. I'm going to wait and just make sure that Bieber gets through his outing healthy, and then I'll draft him. It's my first pick. I'm not going to take a guy and then have him get hurt the very first time he pitches in a game in spring training, which is fine. It's a slow draft for a reason. I feel like if you're going to wait like that, just let the room know. So that way people aren't checking back every 5 minutes, waiting, anticipating that you're going to actually make that pick.
For the record, I have the 9th pick. I'm considering Bieber, which I've never taken a pitcher in the first round. And for the record, I'm just podcasting.
Nice of you to be honest about that.
I may check in. I may check on the Bieber situation after the podcast is over.
I mean, yeah, his outing will be done by the time we wrap this up. So that works out really well for you. But you've really never drafted a pitcher in the first round before?
I've never done it.
Really?
Never done it before, yeah.
I mean, part of that's probably that you believe one of your strengths as a player is finding plenty of pitching later. So pushing pitching really early is less of a priority for you. But is this going to be different this year beyond whatever happens in TGFBI?
Some of it is also just like gross, deep-seated bias against pitchers, and it's just old. It's old. Like I've been playing. I'm old now. I'm old. I've been playing baseball fantasy baseball since like 2002. And when I started, I said, I'm not drafting a pitcher until the 10th inning. I'm going to whoop your pants. I hope I didn't say that.
Is that what you said? How you talk trash back then?
That's my trash talking. Never been a particularly good trash talker. Anyway, I'm not going to take a pitcher to the 10th and I want to beat your behind.
Are those people still your friends? Man.
I never talk trash.
That's like Pete Weber celebrating his U.S. Open championship. That was just circulating again because it was an anniversary for that event.
What does he
say? You think you are? I am.
Yeah. Anyway, my point was I used to take pictures in the 10th, start taking pictures in the 10th, and it worked because I think we were as good at seeing who were good pitchers, like, identifying the good pitchers we weren't as good at. I think I think it was the pace of draft it worked for back in the day, because I think everyone took pictures later, and then so if everyone takes their pictures later, then you can wait even later and still get, like, I was still getting like 2 top 20 guys and picking in the 10th, so I don't know. It's been a long sort of slow process for me of being like, no, I got to take pictures early. They make up X amount of the roster, X% of the roster, and the very best pitchers can be worth just as much as the very best hitters. And injury is just the chaos that comes for us all, and it's just you have to pay the piper and get the best pitchers. So I'm thinking about Bieber, but I also got my man Christian Yelich there, and like I really think he's gonna like 35-20, like 275, 35-20, and I'm just like, man, I don't really want to give that up.
I don't either. I am in the 11th spot, and I'm glad that Jeff is planning on taking Bieber. I want Bieber to be healthy just because I don't want players to get hurt, but it's either going to be Yelich or Trevor Story, depending on what the team next to me does. They could very well take Yelich, and, I'm not going to get him. But I do find myself not wanting to draft Bieber. I'm comfortable drafting DeGrom. I'm comfortable drafting Cole. I'm comfortable drafting a bunch of the starting pitchers that we see consistently going in round 2. I just can't figure out what it is about Bieber that I don't actually like in the moment. Even though when I step back and look at the numbers and look at the underlying skills, it all makes sense. It's reflected in the rankings. I think he belongs in the late part of round 1. But every single time in the moment, whether it is a draft or an auction, I talk myself out of it. I don't go the extra dollar if it's an auction, and I decide to go with one of the hitters instead if I'm in a position where Bieber's out there.
But it's not a pitching. It's not a pitching general thing. So like if Cole somehow, I was at 9 looking at 7, and Cole was still out there, and I was like, whoa, what? I think if Cole gets to me, then I'm definitely taking him. I don't know why I'm hesitating more on Bieber when their projections are pretty similar. But so if you had chance at Cole, you would take him in the first round.
Absolutely. No hesitation whatsoever in that same spot. I would take Garrett Cole.
I mean, it is interesting that he was a command, 88, 89 mile an hour JUCO kind of prospect, just not on people's radars. And even as he started to put velocity on, of course, then the prospect, he got on prospect list. I'm not saying that everybody missed on him. Please don't construe my words that way. But I'm just saying that, like, it's a bit of a pop-up guy. Cole is a little bit more of a, was he first overall, like top 3 pick, just blew through the minors, throws super wicked had. I don't know.
It's bias on my part for sure to not want to take Bieber. That's the main reason that I keep coming back to is I look at the scouting reports from when he came up, and it's like, those probably don't matter that much anymore. We've seen him at the highest level do what he's done. So what analysts and evaluators thought he was going to be 2 and 3 years ago probably doesn't matter anymore. And yet in my head, it seems to have some sort of value.
Yes, it doesn't really matter at some point but it's not like his track record is so voluminous.
Nice.
That you can be like, oh, we know who he is now. There is a little bit of like, well, his best season was a short season, and He was giving up some homers before and some hard contact. And, Alex Chamberlain has famously pointed out some of Bieber's shortcomings inside the zone in terms of the hard contact he gives up. So, and that could be related to not having the overpowering stuff, right? But at the same time, like, I think what we're looking at is like Kyle Hendricks with velocity,
which would be a
in a
really
way,
fun add-on
right?
for
It's not
Kyle
perfect.
Hendricks.
It's not a perfect, yeah, right. It's not a perfect corollary because Kyle Hendricks is the change-up guy, blah, 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 blah. But like, I think we're talking about like plus command with 94 instead of plus command at whatever Kyle Hendricks throws, 90, 89, 90.
88. A lot of 88, 89.
This is the face I make when I talk about 88. 88 miles an hour makes me make this face.
Yeah, the 88 face. So I need to get over it. I need to get past my fear of Shane Bieber in the first round because everything appears to be in place for him to continue to return value of a top 5 starting pitcher. So if I solve it, I'll let you know what the issue is.
But I was also doing some eat this, not that. And like Bueller's projections are really similar, man. Just really similar. I think that the biggest difference, when I did Auction Calculator, the thing that's really killing me is it's like $44 for Bieber and $37 for Christian Yelich. And I'm like, God, that's pretty big. But when I like looked at the projections, it's mostly a volume thing. Bueller and Bieber's per inning projections are pretty similar. I don't know why Zips is like has a fairly wide discrepancy. Zips has Bieber at like a 3.5 ERA and Bueller at a 3.1 ERA. So Zips is telling me to wait and take Bueller.
You could.
It's time for those big long sighs and push the button.
Yeah, and swearing at the screen when things don't break the way you want.
I just got super pissed. I'm in a long draft and hold. What's it called? OC, the OC champions or whatever.
Draft
OC,
champions. That's a DC.
Draft champ, DC. Yeah. So I'm in a draft and hold, and we're in like I think we're at like 430 in terms of picks, and I just screamed at my computer. I hope my wife didn't hear me. I just screamed at my computer because someone took Max Stassi.
All the reasons to go on tilt, that's not one of them.
You bastard! Sniped me at 438.
You can't get sniped on Max Stassi anywhere, and you can't get sniped on anybody at 438. This is not a snipe. It's just the draft happening.
Long.
Yeah. Well, with games happening, with things happening, with news actually breaking, we talked about this a bit on Friday. The best shape of his life stories, of course, those don't mean a whole lot. At least that's what Ben Lindbergh's study found. They're not completely meaningless, but they're not necessarily as meaningful as we'd like. It brings us to a broader question of what matters when we're watching baseball and we're watching baseball news in the spring. And if you look at RotoWire or former Roto World, now NBC Sports Edge, you look at the news pages there, it's a great way to stay on top of the information. You'll see a whole variety of different things. You'll see guys pitching a scoreless inning. You'll see someone working on a new pitch. You'll see a minor injury, like Anthony Rendon's not playing on Monday due to soreness. It is unspecified soreness. It's just soreness. He's just 31, and he started doing more exercise last week, so he's a little sore. I can relate to that. But then you get to stuff like this. Xander Bogaerts had an MRI on his shoulder, and the MRI came back negative, so it doesn't seem like anything that's going to cause us to drop Bogaerts too far in rankings. But it might actually be something, because when you look at a news aggregator, you see a headline and you see the person who gathered that information, you see their spin on what happened. And sometimes in putting those news items together, the original information gets slightly lost. And this is not at all a shot at people that do this. This is just explaining how the process works. This is how the sausage is made. You need to click through the links when you look at news on those sites, because the quotes from the team sometimes shed a little extra light on just how serious something might be. In this case, if you look at the quotes, and the original piece came from Jason Mastrodonato, I believe Jason is with the Boston Herald. If you look at the original quote from Chaim Bloom, it makes you feel a little more pessimistic than you'd feel if you only read the player note. So the quote from Chaim Bloom, nothing concerning, no, all what you would expect. He should be ready, parentheses, for opening day. Obviously, we won't skip steps with him. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but we should have the time we need, end quote. That to me says we expect him back playing in spring games before opening day, but we're not going to push it, which would suggest some kind of like 1 to 2 week injury or absence, a very minor, strain sort of issue. No structural damage, but if we're going to take Bogaerts out of action for a couple of weeks and we're going to say there's a non-zero chance that he misses opening day, that does probably knock him down a couple of spots, even if he doesn't even fall more than a half round in ADP over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, nothing in the MRI ignores the fact that there was something that created the need for an MRI, and everything was all clear in the MRI, and then there are steps, to this process. Means that this is like an actual thing. This is an actual injury of some sort that requires rest. That's step one, and then sort of some sort of rehab. Step two. That's the normal process, So it's not like he stubbed his toe, he's out today, it's not. I would take soreness, man. even if that suggests something about how he's feeling age-wise, I think it's much more nebulous, and there's no steps. The step is he's going to sit on his ass today. Tomorrow hopefully won't be sore. So yeah, I don't know. I think that you have to ding Bogaerts a little bit here, especially we're still seeing a ton of big homers. We saw a beautiful big homer from Gary Sanchez today, which cleared the batter's eye and just looked like a 600-foot dong. But if the ball is deadened at all, I think that Bogaerts could be one of the guys who loses a little bit. Now, if he misses a week and the ball's deadened and he's a 280 guy who hits 22 homers this year, are you taking him in the right spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm looking at him. So without accounting for the shoulder, I've got Bogaerts behind Alex Bregman and Anthony Rendon, very tightly clustered together. I've got Bogaerts ahead of Manny Machado. The market doesn't have that. ADP has Machado 12 spots ahead of him.
I'd take Manny, especially now. I'd take Manny.
Right. I'd flip Manny over Bogaerts now. I'd probably take Ozzie Albies over Bogaerts right now. And again, this is based on what we know on Monday, March 1st. Thursday could roll around and Bogaerts could be playing in a spring game again, and you flip it back. But if you're drafting today,
there were fewer steps than we thought.
Right. But if you're drafting Monday, you're drafting Tuesday or Wednesday, you know what you know right now, and you do want to account for this information without overreacting to it. So I would probably lower Bogaerts to probably my 21st hitter. That would put him behind Machado, behind Albies, behind Devers, and behind Bo Bichette. I think I'd still take Bogaerts over Adalberto Mondesi if that were my decision. Or I might just go to the pitching side and take a pitcher and let someone else deal with it.
Some dude just hit Rake Lamb on the knee. Yeah. So, should we have an injury hierarchy? Which are the worst injuries? No, it is meaningful because let's say Jake Lamb's knee is broken, right? Like that's obviously something broken or torn that's the top tier. That's like, oh crap. Like do not draft, I think. Right. Because we don't if something's broken or torn, you don't even know how broken or torn it is. And then you don't know what the thing is. If there's surgery involved, you at least don't have that. Like it's stupid to hear, but you don't have that. Well, it was what we expected, everything went according to plan sort of thing. Because there are surgeries where they go in, they're like, well, we thought we were taking some chips out, but TJ, so anything broken or torn, obviously I think they go right into do not draft. I want to know so much more, at least a temporary do not draft, right? Until maybe some more news comes out. And then I think in the next level of soreness, we don't know what's going on, we're taking a step back. I have body parts that I care about more than others. So I think shoulder, people talk about elbow, but there are guys who, like Tanaka, slightly torn elbow, managed to be great for a long time. And like, I have a feeling that like pitcher's elbows, like most of the time they hurt, I think. And so elbow doesn't worry me so much. Shoulder, I don't want to hear anything about a shoulder. That means it's starting to creep up the kinetic chain or whatever. It's trying to creep up into the bigger parts of their body. That means something's worse there. So I don't really want to hear about shoulders. And here's a surprising one that bothers me: obliques. Um, it's really tricky because sometimes you can really have like a 2-day oblique thing where it's just like it's just sort of day, but then you can also have a 2-day thing that becomes a 5-day thing, becomes like a 2-week thing. Even if when they're playing, they're not getting the same bat speed, they're not getting the same arm speed, whatever it is. Like, this is a game of obliques. Like, I think I would actually drop a guy down a little bit just if I heard him saying something about his obliques.
This is a game of obliques. Like,
I
never heard you would say it
well,
that
it's very
way.
rotational, it's very rotational. It's
No,
definitely an obliques game.
yeah, it definitely impacts hitters and pitchers in a pretty significant way. Usually it's an IL stint. Usually it's a couple of weeks at the earliest before a player comes back from something like that. A lot of times it's even like 4 to 6. So I'm right there with you. I think there are different categories of injuries and different body parts we're more concerned about than others, especially this time of year.
Oh, and because of Britt, I'm a little bit more aware of calf muscles now.
Mm.
Britt and Josh Donaldson together have because remember Britt was saying that like sprint speed is the thing that you lose the quickest.
Right.
On Friday. So you're saying sprint speed is the thing like sprint fitness is the thing you lose the quickest. And I believe that actually, because I'm trying to do some running, and I read about running training, and a lot of them are like, you have to run 5 days a week. You'll start losing running fitness on the order of 1 or 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it where like, oh, my calf or oh, my Achilles, I'm going to take a week off or something. When I start back up again, I'm like, what? 5 miles feels like a marathon again. What? What? And I've been trying to get back up. Like I ran like 11 miles last year, and I've been trying to get my max run back up to that. And I'm talking about like last August, I ran 11 miles. I got to 9 last week, but it's been a slog, just because I took like a week off in December. So running speed, anything that makes them, they can't run, means that I think it would be hard for them to play baseball.
Yeah, that ramp back up takes a little bit of time to get back to that
Donaldson's
previous level.
calf was so bad for him.
But what else moves the needle this time of year? It's not just injury information that we're seeing. We're seeing velocity reports. We're seeing new pitches, right? Jason Collette's been doing the new pitch tracker for a while. And new pitches, I think, are a little bit deceiving because a guy throws a pitch in a Grapefruit League game or a Cactus League game doesn't mean he trusts that pitch enough to throw it when the games count. So I think we can be sometimes quick to jump in on a new pitch and say, oh, he's got a third pitch now. Oh, he's got another pitch he can use against lefties. And then that pitch is an absolute ghost once we turn the page and get to April.
And we don't get the all important pitch percentages. So they could talk about, having thrown their new cutter in the game or whatever. And we don't even know if if he's talking about throwing, 10%, or he threw 2 cutters and called it a day, because we don't I honestly don't really think a person owns a pitch on the major league level until they throw it at least like 8% of the time. If they throw something 3 to 5% of the time, nobody game plans for that. Nobody is like worried about that pitch. It's just a surprise pitch, probably not a very good pitch. They don't trust it enough. So we don't even know those percentages. And actually, the way that that percentages and the stints that they pitch in work is also relevant for velocity, because I would say generally big up in velocity is good, big down is bad. And there's enough research that shows that these big movements are meaningful. But there is also research that shows that spring training velo changes are not that useful. And I think it's because you'll have guys come out for what are they doing now? 1 inning stints, right? And then, a couple of weeks, it's 2 or 3 innings. They're adding like an inning or 2 every time they go out. And so you'll see a guy like DeGrom will sit 99 for his whole first inning of work. Well, he knows he's only going to throw 25 pitches a day. You know what I mean? And it's DeGrom, so he's going to air it out and get on the social media, and like everyone's laughing about it. And yes, I do think DeGrom throws hard, and I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm saying that it may not be that useful because he may sit where he sat last year. And then I remember everyone was like, "You Darvish touched 97 today," and I'm like, "You Darvish's max velo last year was 97." You know,
Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to throw harder.
Right. So you got to put everything in context. You'd be like, what are you giving me? Are you giving me a max number or a sits number? If you're giving me a sits number, tell me how many innings he threw. If he sat this for 3 innings and it's plus 1 or 2 ticks over last year, then I'm starting to listen. It has to have some volume to it. It has to be voluminous.
The word of the day. The other thing I'm looking at this time of year is new defensive positions. Similar to testing out a pitch, it doesn't necessarily mean a team's going to actually play a guy in that new spot when the games begin to count. But I think that might be a greater indicator of intent, comparatively speaking. Like dabbling with a new pitch, yeah, that might disappear. But we saw Gene Segura last spring. The last live baseball game that I got to see was a spring training game with you. It was Orioles Phillies in Clearwater, and Gene Segura was playing his new position. That wasn't a secret at the time, but I think he was playing third the day we saw him, and previously people expected him to play second, right? Just getting a sense for how pieces fit, especially when a new player was added to the mix. I think in those situations, seeing how the defensive alignment works is actually something I'm pretty interested in, because we're talking about paths for players to qualify at new positions, and they become multi-position players soon after the season begins, which in a lot of formats becomes a way of adding a little bit of extra value after draft season.
Yeah, I mean, in related news, Segura is actually one of my guys so far in drafts. It looks like I like him just because he's going to give you a little bit of power and speed, and also 2B/3B is a rare mix in these days, and makes you MI and CI, so it's really a 4-position guy that gives you a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. I don't know, like it's worked out that I needed something like that at the right time, and the price was right, so I'll point that out at Segura. But then also, I like what you're saying about like organizational future, organizational desires. Like I was thinking about Ty France with regards to this. I saw Ty France is mostly taking ground balls at third base. That's a little awkward because they have a third baseman in Kyle Seager, and so you might just say, whatever. He's just expanding his versatility. However, I then went to Corey Brock and said, what's the deal with Ty France usage? I feel like he's the starting DH, but he's taking the balls at third. Does that mean he's going to replace Seager when Seager leaves? And yeah, Brock was like, yeah, that's how I see it too. So that means, headed towards third base in the future, most likely to, to be third base eligible after this year, I would say. But also tells you something about like how the organization values him. Like they're more likely to play him at DH and have him actually be a starter all year if they think he's going to be their third baseman in 2022. And so I gave Ty France a little nudge upwards. The guy can probably hit, and they have a position in mind for him. So that definitely, I think it's a little bit stronger than, taking ground balls at is weaker than played in the game at. But there's still some signal to that noise.
Yeah, and just comparing that to how relievers are deployed, I would say reliever usage doesn't give us much of anything in spring training, because a lot of teams are going to prioritize their high leverage relievers earlier in the game, soon after the starters leave, because they want the high leverage relievers to face actual major league hitters as opposed to upper level minor league guys that enter the game late. So if Giovanni Gallegos pitched the 9th inning on Sunday, regardless of the score, it doesn't really mean all that much. Doesn't mean he's closer or further to save chances based on that usage.
The 5th. I have to say that I'm finding it harder to understand the quality of competition right now, because I think normally in the past, like you're right, they would bring the closers out. Sometimes the closers would open games because they would be like, okay, we're making sure that you're gonna place the best bats today, so we're gonna get you in here right at the beginning of the game. But now that innings, now that we're down to 7-inning games, and have these weird things where like, I'm pretty sure I watched Garrett Richards walk off the mound with 2 outs because he hit 20 pitches. And I
And they
think
could
that
just
they
be
were
like,
just
we're
like,
good.
yeah, that's the end
Done.
of that inning. Which actually, you know what, dude? I mean, these games don't count. You know, if it's supposed to be developmental, then that's fine. It doesn't bother me. But as as an analyst, it makes it a little bit harder because now you're like, this guy who's a closer candidate came in the third and, mopped the floor with them. I have no idea who he faced in the third. They might have already taken out the hitters because today's a 5-inning game.
If they're gonna mess around with game lengths, I have to imagine they're gonna have to lower the price of spring training tickets. You can't expect people to pay borderline regular season prices for spring training tickets if you're gonna cut the game in half and barely play guys that are actual major leaguers. I mean, they
spring training
they
is
won't necessarily, but it is just
right.
like an attempt to print money. And now they're even like, well, players, if you don't really want to play, or if teams you don't really want to put that guy out there, you don't have to. It's fine. We'll just
20 pitches, just call it quits. Yeah, no, I think spring training is very weird. I mean, I don't know if everyone knows, but like the players aren't paid for it.
right.
So the players aren't paid for it, and they're taking money at the gate. Even if the tickets are cheaper, like they're still taking money at the gate. I'm sure that they make money off of spring, and it's 6 weeks long. They're making money off of this. The players, and they're giving the players free food and like some sort of little stipend, and being like, woohoo.
Which, I mean, if you're an established big leaguer, okay, your situation's a little bit different. But for the guys that are fighting for roster spots, for the guys that didn't get big bonuses, we talk about this group of players all the time. Like, they're in pretty difficult
They'll
spots.
save the stipend and eat as much as they can of the free food. I mean, they're like in college when like I used to get prodded and zapped for like, the $10, whatever. It's come participate in my study.
Free pizza.
Free pizza. I'm like, all right, I'm there.
You will be here for 3 hours. We will stab you with needles and take your blood,
Yeah.
but you get free pizza. And you're like, yeah, 3 hours free pizza. That sounds about right.
That's okay.
I'll give that a shot for some free pizza. But I'm glad to have the games back. As weird as they are, as broken up as they are, and as limited in talent as they are in some instances, still better to have it than to not, especially given some of the alternatives. With the NBA season in full swing, baseball is getting underway, and the NCAA tournament and the Masters are just around the corner. The sports calendar is officially heating up, and that means now is the perfect time to take your sports fan couch experience to the next level by getting in on the action yourself. The Athletic has partnered with BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks, to bring you the latest odds and exclusive offers to bring you closer to the game than ever. Subscribers of The Athletic get in-depth analysis from our newsroom, plus insight into the latest betting trends and odds from BetMGM's team of experts, getting you the context you need to nail your next pick or parlay. I am going to nail that Brandon Woodruff plus 2,500 to win the NL Cy Young. I've been singing that one for weeks now. Right now, BetMGM is offering Rates and Barrels listeners a risk-free first bet up to $600. Just sign up at betmgm.com and use the bonus code RATES to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. This offer is for new customers. It's a risk-free first bet up to $600 at betmgm.com with the bonus code RATES. Visit betmgm.com for terms and conditions. Must be 21 years of age or older to wager. Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia only. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, Nevada, and Virginia. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. And 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. In Tennessee, call or text the red line at 800-889-9789. If you or somebody you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. Promotional offer not available in Nevada. All right, let's get to auction strategy thoughts. We've got the LABR auctions coming up this weekend, and we have an online conference, third week in a row with some cool stuff happening on the weekend. First pitch, Florida, would have been in person. Obviously, with the pandemic, That is on hold, but the event is happening online. Our friends at Baseball HQ are putting that together. You've got a presentation on Saturday. I'm moderating. Basically, we're having an episode of Rates and Barrels live as part of the conference. Is the real thing, I guess, that's kind of happening with that.
Yeah, when you said presentation, I was like, what?
It was on the rundown. It says an hour with Eno, so could be anything.
I'm okay with it because, like Pitcher List we did the same thing. We just sat and talked for a little bit, and I'm all right with it because it takes a lot less work and a lot less prep work and like presentation. Woo, miss me on that.
The deep data. No, we'll talk about some of the cutting edge stuff that's happening.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have hours with me all the time. I have hours and hours and hours with me.
Well, you got a little time to come up with the final strategy, but I'm sure you put some significant thought into how you're going to approach the AL labor auction this weekend and just auctions as a whole. We've talked about them on this show before, usually around this time of year, because it's a good time to start digging into those strategies. What's unique for you auction-wise going into 2021? Is there anything that's very different about your approach? You mentioned earlier that you don't usually draft pitchers in the first round. I assume that means you don't often pay $30+ for an ace in an auction, but are you more likely to pay up in an auction where you have more flexibility with how the rest of your roster comes together?
Yeah, I've been moving actually slightly towards a model of so my hitting model generally is to try and get the cheapest stud. And what I found is that my projections always kind of come under on the top players. So like my top player will be like for a long time, my top player would Trout for like $35 and he'd go for 40. And I just didn't feel like I wanted to push past my values that much. And what I tried to basically get a $30 player for 30, instead of paying 40 for a $35 player. So that means that it's almost like a two second rounder approach. It's like I'm gonna get 2 second rounders. I have to pay. There will be times where you just have to pay all the way to your value, maybe $1 or $2 more. Maybe you have to pay 31 to get my 30. But I'm going to get one of those. I'm not going to get the number one player, and I'm going to try and pay at my value, and that actually pushes my hitting into the middle. So what I end up doing is not having many dollar players, maybe having just $1 outfielder or $1 utility player, because even like a $2 or $3 bid at the end game can be really powerful. When people are they're like, oh, that guy's still out there, and someone's trying to sneak him in at $1 and you got $2, bam, you just got the best of the end game guys. And $1 players, hitters, a lot of times are either small side platoon or not even set for playing time. And in like an AL labor type situation, I want to buy playing time. So on the hitter end, I do push towards the middle a little bit. I will try to get like some second rounder types, but I will push towards the middle, try to have a really balanced, buy a lot of innings and plate appearances. On the pitching side, I had been moving towards a stars and scrubs approach, where I will buy like I bought last year. I bought a Aroldis Chapman, or 2 years ago, it was a Aroldis Chapman and Luis Severino. That was my idea. It didn't work out, but that was my idea, that I was gonna like push towards get one really good ace, one really good closer, and then just buy a bunch of cheap arms after that. But I think this year I may do more of a push towards the middle on both. So I feel like pitching is pretty hard to project right now, and putting all my eggs in one basket pitching wise, I guess it could be Cole, but I think Cole will also get that like $35 for $40 type situation, right? Where like he will push the market for pitching. And then behind Cole, specifically in this pool, the AL pitching pool, I just don't see an all eggs in one basket type pitcher where I just want to be like, yeah, I'm going to put $32 on this guy and ride him all the way to victory.
Yeah, and the NL side is similar in that you've got DeGrom kind of up in a tier of his own, right? He's going to be probably a $38 to $40 pitcher, I would guess, in the NL auction this weekend. And you've got that next cluster behind him which is pretty nice in the NL. The NL pitching depth lends itself to, hey, you missed out on DeGrom, but you could either get one from the next group, you could jam in two from the next group if you really wanted to. And it just feels like, especially as we're tracking toward not having the DH in the NL, there's a lot of mid-tier guys that you're more comfortable with now. Guys you'd be worried about if they were facing the extra good hitter in the middle of the lineup, but now they're getting the pitcher spot instead. So that pool seems to run a lot deeper now, as long as that rules change holds up. But I'm comfortable paying up at the top for DeGrom. I think he's done it for enough years. He's, to me, not that much of an injury risk, not much more than a typical pitcher, even though he had the TJ a few years back. I trust the skills completely. My top dollar on him, am I going to 40 for him? I don't know if I'm going quite that high. If it stops closer to 35 or 36, I'll get him. If not, fine, I'll build some other ways. The one thing that I think is also tricky with pitching, though, is figuring out how you want to attack closers in an auction. Because in snakes, like we talked about in the reliever preview, you're really forced to pass up on some good players, whether that's SP3 types or nice bats to kind of round out the meat of your lineup. You're passing on really good players where you're drafting closers. I don't feel that same shame in an auction. I feel like I can still get a lot of guys I really like, even if I do spend up and pay 20 or 22 or something on Josh Hader. I think the problem I have in the NL specifically, though, I don't know of the cheap closers this year. I still don't know if there are that many I actually even want, because in LABR, we can't take players out of our lineups. And I don't want to have Stephen Crichton just in my lineup all the time, right? I don't want him to blow up my ratios
15
and lose the
saves and
job.
a 4.6 ERA. Woohoo!
Yeah, I can't deal with that. Or even like Craig Kimbrell. Like, I think Kimbrell sort of makes sense in mixed league drafts where he goes. He's kind of the reverse Freddie Freeman. Like, I always say that in the early rounds, like in the first round of a draft, I don't want to draft Freddie Freeman. I'll buy Freddie Freeman at an auction. I'll draft Craig Kimbrell in a snake draft. I'm not necessarily going to pay $13 for him as a closer, right? Like, it's funny how the players you're interested in can shift a little bit just because of the flexibility you have in an auction versus that opportunity cost that you have to go through going one pick at a time in a snake.
Yeah, the shape of the player pool is really important, because you can have your values, and this year, and as I have in the past, I have ATC custom ATC values. Shout out to Ariel Cohen. He provides me with some custom ATC values for AL LABR, but I also run the bat. And I have four numbers. I have ADP values, I'll have ATC values, I'll have the bat values, and I'll have what they earned last year. And I'll have those four values in a row just in front of me to look at. Of course, they'll be sorted by one. I won't tell you which one. And one of those numbers will be a no-go for me. Will represent like the ceiling for me. But it's nice to have a range there in numbers wise. But beyond that, there's the shape of the player pool. So in a snake draft, like, remember we did the analysis for KDS for snake drafts, and we're talking about, like, well, if you take, if you have the 11 pick, then you're going to end up probably with Yelich and Bueller, right? And I ended up having a really basic draft where I almost followed ADP all the way without even meaning to. The same thing will happen in an auction. It's a slightly different, but it'll be like, if I sink my resources into this player, these are the things that I will get from it, right? And then I will have less, I'll have fewer resources to buy. So, like, just to give an example, if I do sink a lot of my money into Freddie Freeman, it is almost like a snake draft. If I do sink my money into Freddie Freeman, I'm buying a first baseman and batting average and power, and I will need to, therefore, sink my second most resources into someone who's different than that.
Mm-hmm.
It almost works like a snake, but you can choose what that second most resource will be. You have more power, but you probably will have some effect from buying Freddie Freeman. It means that your second guy will be somebody that is like, maybe it's a Starling Marte type, right? Where it's like, I need steals mostly from this guy, and I want to spend, my second most expensive guy will probably be like sort of $20 to $25. these are the guys that. So if I buy Freeman, this is what we talk about with like decision trees. If I buy Freeman, I bought power and first base and floor and all this stuff. My next guy maybe it'll be Keston Hira, because he's a second baseman that will steal some bases and maybe have a bad batting average. That pairs pretty well with Freeman. But I ended up doing these little, almost like it's like a mock draft, and you can just do the mock draft, but I don't have enough time to do tons of mock drafts. So I will do a mock draft in my head where I'm like, I just basically fill out a roster. You know what I mean? Like I'll have a roster out, and I'll be like, okay, if I buy Devers with my most money, or if I buy Jose Ramirez with my most money, or if I buy, this is what happens after that. I'll end up spending here and here, and I'll look at the different teams and I'll say, you know what, I kind of like it more when I start with Devers than when I start with Bregman, or when you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll do it like that too, where I'm actually either through the RotoWire draft software, which I've always used, or just taking Excel or a piece of paper. I'm going to go through the auction values. What does my roster look like if I spend 40 on my best hitter, and then if I buy three $30 players and a few $20 players? What's the rest of my roster going to look like? What combination of skills can I get if I allocate resources that way? There's only a handful of $40 players. So if that $40 player is DeGrom, like if I do go to 40 on him, I feel like that's the right choice.
Where am I going to,
what's going to hurt me later? Like what $30
Yeah.
hitters am I going to build around not having a $40 hitter, right? Like just kind of seeing like, what happens if we go this way? All right, that looks all right. What if I do it this way at the beginning? Putting those bases together really gives you different ways to build, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen on draft day. One person in the room in the auction can push you off one of your foundational players. And the quicker you can pivot to plan B, plan C, plan D, the better off you're going to be. And you have to be flexible. You really have to be flexible in any league, but in an auction especially. As much as you want to script it out, it can backfire on you very quickly if you're too rigid, if you're too locked into a very specific foundation.
Yeah, I had a really weird thing happen last year where I had two decision trees where I was like, one is Devers and one is Jose Ramirez. And I thought I'd get a little bit more speed from Jose Ramirez. So, I could make some different decisions down in the outfield, maybe some power guys, you know what I mean? And one was Devers. And for some reason, I just liked the teams that I was building coming off of Devers. So I identified Devers. I was like, okay, I think he's going to be my 30, $34, $35 guy. And the value spit out 33, 34. Everything's going to go happy if I go that way. And he went for like 36, and I just couldn't bring myself to put that extra dollar on, And so I was like, well, okay, now we're switching to the Jose Ramirez plan. At least that's my second plan. And I threw Jose Ramirez, and I bought Jose Ramirez for 35 when the dollar sheet said like 33. So when it came, I went the extra dollar for Ramirez, and it was just a gut thing, and it worked out really well for me because, I ended up second in the league, and Ramirez has had a great season and the steals and everything. But I thought I'd screwed up. I came out of the first break being like, why didn't I just put that extra dollar on Devers?
I think that's why it's important to know how many players are in each group, though. Like when you go through that, how many $30 players do you see? Because then if you're about to run out of $30 players you like, all right, well, I'm going to go the extra buck or two here because I really want to make sure I get
buck
someone.
On Ramirez because it was later in the draft, right? It was later in the draft, and there was fewer $35 guys left. I was like, well, if I want to get a $35 bat, like this, Ramirez is one of the last ones. Here we go.
Right. So you're going to adjust to the room a little bit, at a certain point. If the room's paying +2, +3, +4 over the projections for top end players, you're going to have to follow suit and pay a +2 or a +3 up top, knowing that later on a couple of the $2 and $3 players are going to be $1 players. And if it keeps happening beyond the first 15, 20 players, sure, then those savings are going to extend up into the $4 and $5 players. Those guys will become $1 and $2 players if your $30 guys are all 33, 34, 35, right? Like the money spent earlier is going to come off the very bottom end of the pool as you start to make those adjustments. You don't want to have to pay +5 or +7 for an $18 player in the middle of the auction because you didn't buy enough production early on. I think that's a really, really hard lesson to learn for some people as they get into auctions for the first time. And I spend very aggressively, so fortunately, I haven't run into that problem in a very long time. Hopefully, I never run into that problem again. But looking at the NL pool, I'm so glad I'm in the NL and not the AL. I just think there are so many more interesting ways to build an NL only team compared to an AL only team. I feel like you get steered into a few more specific directions based on how the AL pool is built.
Well, if you're drafting in an AL only situation, I would look at second base pretty hard. I don't know. I've said this about the old overall player pool, but AL second base is tough. AL pitching is pretty tough. There were some high profile moves from the AL to the NL. Some top arms, and so there is a bit of a 1-2 and then you know so you have to really make a decision on, am I going to bid hard on those two, or if I'm not going to bid hard on those two, who are the two number twos that I am going to go to $15 on, if I'm not going to go to 38 on Shane Bieber, who are the secondary guys that I think could anchor a staff. So those are the two things I would say that I'm thinking about. I don't want to give away too much, but those are things that I'm looking at. I may make different decisions than you would looking at the same information, but I think that those are two key parts of the AL player pool in particular.
And if you are looking for really like a really in-depth conversation about auctions, Ariel Cohen, the Beat the Shift podcast that he does with Ruvain Guy, they had me on as a guest to talk about auctions. It's like almost 90 minutes of auction analysis. Ariel's a great auction player too, so I would highly recommend checking out that episode if you're either just getting into auctions for the first time, or you're trying to kind of kick it up on their level, and you want to get further down the rabbit hole of different things you can do to have a lot of success in a format like this. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the auction this weekend. It's one of my favorite weekends of the year. Bummed, of course, that we're not able to do it live, but still good to get together, jump on a Zoom, get to see some faces and hear the voices of some of our friends, and probably have a beer or two at the end of the evening anyway. Even like we'll have a virtual fire pit or something. We'll find a way to make it work. Introducing a far superior product to today's CBD marketplace, the Eagle Moon Hemp Consumer Line. Grown, harvested, extracted, and produced all in the United States. All Eagle Moon hemp products are vegan, low sugar, use organic practices, and are made from award-winning crop. And just in case you didn't know, CBD is not marijuana. It does not get you high. CBD may help to relieve pain, nausea, seizures, anxiety, and depression. Get 30% off all CBD products site-wide at eaglemoonhemp.com. Use the promo code ATHLETIC. Their products are pure, proven, lab-tested, and superior to other CBD on the market. And the best part is they're way less in price. Throw the discount code in and you're practically getting a product for free. That's eaglemoonhemp.com with the promo code ATHLETIC. Try them out while winning free products. Just go to their Facebook page and leave a review or follow them on Instagram. A winner is chosen each week and sent a free product. Check them out and let us know how you like them. That's eaglemoonhemp.com, promo code ATHLETIC. As we all try to get into the best shapes of our lives, we are all trying to eat better. But healthy breakfast doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be oatmeal. Magic Spoon has the amazing flavors you love, but without all the bad stuff. 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. How about only 140 calories a serving? It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free. And we've got exciting news. Magic Spoon will be releasing 2 amazing new flavors this month for a limited time only. We're talking about cookies and cream and maple waffle. And if that isn't the most comforting, indulgent combination, I don't know what is. This is the ultimate treat yourself combo. So make sure you get some while you can for a limited time, or build your own box. Available flavors to build your own custom bundle are cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, and cinnamon. And if you're listening from Canada, Magic Spoon now ships there as well. Fruity has been my favorite flavor so far. I highly recommend that if you're going to build your own variety box. Go to magicspoon.com/rates to grab the new limited edition cookies and cream maple waffle or a custom bundle of cereal to try today. And be sure to use our promo code RATES at checkout to save $5 off your order. This offer is now good anywhere in the US or Canada, but only when you use our code at checkout. Magic Spoon is so confident their product is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/rates and use the code RATES to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. All right, got a few questions here, Eno, before we go. This first one comes from Kevin. It's about prospect platoon splits. Kevin's in a position with the second pick in his rookie draft, and he's choosing between Andrew Vaughn and Jared Kelenic. He's been leaning toward Kelenic for a while now, but one of the buddies he has in his league said he just hates lefties, which is really interesting. This had me wondering about his splits and whether the Mariners might mess around by platooning him. I think this is just a broader question, really. Like, do prospect platoon splits matter that much? And if they do matter, have we even seen enough from Jared Kelenic to believe that he can't hit lefties or can hit lefties, right? Like, I feel like it's one of these things that we really wouldn't know this early in his career, and how the Mariners handle him or how any team handles a young prospect also hinges on how the rest of their roster comes together and whether or not they even have someone they could easily platoon with that player.
Yeah, and then it's complicated by just the overall quality of the prospect and his the way that he'll hit the ground in the major leagues when he gets there. Because if you think about it, like a prospect for the Yankees, if you theoretically knew their platoon splits, you would ding them harder, right? Because the Yankees would actually use him that way. The Yankees are usually good. So if the guy gets to the major leagues, they know he has a platoon problem, they'll probably land him in a platoon situation. That's just who they are, you know? But the Mariners, I think you're talking about a top 2 prospect in baseball right now, top 3 with Kelenic. And so, and they're not going to be so good that they're going to try and squeeze every ounce of production out of him when he first gets to the big leagues. So they're going to give him a lot more time. So I would say in the average position for a prospect, it'd be more interesting to see how they're used at the major league level than it would be to know their minor league platoon splits. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'd worry about it too much with prospects. I think that a young player like a Miguel Andujar or a young player that's like playing on a team where they're not using him in those positions. Could we have seen Hunter Renfroe's current situation by his prospect platoon splits, or would be Jock Peterson? Jock Peterson was a decently regarded prospect that came up with the Dodgers, and they only use him in platoon. So long-winded answer, I would say the organization matters as much. The organization and the landing situation matters as much as the actual platoon splits themselves, I think.
Right. And I think with Jock Peterson, like, he came up and was playing for a contender, and a contender is going to have depth, and a contender is going to be, very, very adamant about making sure that the lineup is as good as it can be every day, because every single game matters. But player development matters more for a rebuilding team. I would say in Kelenic's case, I'm not worried about it. He's going to get chances. It's going to take him a few years in the big leagues before the Mariners look at him and say, we're not playing against lefties. I think he's going to be an everyday guy very soon after he comes up. So in that case, I wouldn't worry about it. It is the kind of thing that you don't want to ignore. If a guy is striking out a lot more against lefties in the minors, yeah, you would care about that. But if you see even a 200-point difference in OPS, I think was what was pointed out from 2019, you're still talking about 1 year split across multiple levels, where all those plate appearances against lefties, you're talking maybe 100 to 125 plate appearances total. It's still such a limited sample that you'd be likely introducing something to your analysis that's hurting you more than helping you if you're reading too much into that. So don't ignore it, but don't make decisions based on that entirely. Some other examples of players he mentioned, Jock Peterson, Michael Conforto when he first came up at the very least, Jesse Winker. I get it. Like, it's a real thing to account for, but Kelenic's also, I think, going to be a decent defender too, which helps drive that playing time. Sometimes the guys that end up on big side platoons are left-handed mashers who are below average defenders.
Yeah, Winker's not a great defender.
And that kind of pulls them out of the lineup too, because then you got 2 reasons. You want to play the platoon advantage, and you want a better glove out there because then you're getting an
Mhm.
upgrade in two facets like that way.
Yeah. I suppose we could have seen Winker's Platoon coming, I guess. I don't
Maybe.
know. But there's so many other ways he could have busted. The way that he turned out, I'm not complaining about. Like he's a valuable major league player and a valuable fantasy piece. Yeah, and he gets Platoon. I don't
What
know.
about Alex Kirilloff? That's the
Also,
other
you'd
player.
rather have the lefty if they're going to end up getting Platoon, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, then you're on the big side.
you don't want Mike Brousseau.
But the other player that Kevin asked us about is Alex Kirilloff, who's supposed to come up and have a big role with the Twins.
Hmm.
Do you see him being a little more vulnerable to possibly getting
Hmm.
the early career Platoon treatment?
That is a tougher one because the Twins are going to be good. They're going to try and win their division this year. Is Jake Cave a righty? Because that would give them. I think he probably is, just from the profile. I'm guessing.
Is Jake Cave a righty? No, Jake Cave's a lefty.
Whoa, really? So Arise,
Play him in a corner?
Arias, bats lefty too, dude. Maybe not.
I'm surprised they don't have a
Who's
right-handed
going to
hitting
take his?
outfielder.
Yeah, who's going to take his job? Rooker, who's like a first
Not
baseman,
a good defender.
not a good defender. That's interesting. Yeah, I think in this case, I would play that game. I'd play the depth chart game, and I'd look around and I'd be like, I don't see an obvious person to platoon with him. I mean, I doubt they're going to put Keon Broxton out there instead of Alex Kirilloff.
You wouldn't think. I mean, Keon Broxton is a good emergency. If Byron Buxton's hurt, you get a good defender, has power and speed, but has a high K percentage and is a
I would
clear
guess
like
Triple A
8-9
depth.
hitter. Yeah, he's more of a quad A sort of guy that is interesting, but definitely not a guy you're putting on the field at the expense of Kirilloff.
I got a text update.
Oh, are you on the clock?
Bieber's sitting 93 to 94. But I was just podcasting, okay? I was just podcasting.
You were not at all reaching out to people on site to give you some scouting reports on how Bieber looked.
Yeah,
Nope.
Exactly. Nope, not doing that at all.
Thanks a lot for that question, Kevin. It's a good question to think about when you're looking at young players, either to stash or for keeper, for dynasty, whatever the case might be. This next email got my attention because of the subject line. Subject lines are always important. Rates and barrels at theathletic.com. If you go the email route, the subject line said, I will send bottles of Jester King if you tell me this trade didn't suck. I'm going to open that email sooner than the other emails. So they're not always open in the order that they're received. Sometimes the more interesting subject line does get my attention. I'm sorry to admit that. The question comes from John. He's looking for brutal, honest feedback on an Ottoneu trade that he made. He gave away Anthony Rendon, who is at $39, for Mark Canha at $5 and Brady Singer at $3. Was this a bleep trade? A more general question in this kind of format. How do you evaluate cheap points above replacement value guys, which is what I got, against the studs that guarantee you max points for a higher cost per point? Which is a common question that we're thinking about when we're looking at keeper questions and trying to decide what to do with rosters in formats like this. It's very common. This situation, I feel like I'd be telling a pretty big lie to get that Jester King. Like I don't like this trade.
King is tempting.
Yeah, it's really tempting. I can't get that up here. I've never had it before, and I've only heard good things. And I like free beer. I like really good free beer even more. But I would have held Anthony Rendon here. I understand, like you run to a point in leagues with an in-season cap or with just a cap in general where you can't always keep the studs that you want to keep. Eventually, you got to take a guy like Rendon and say, all right, I got to turn Rendon into some younger, cheaper players. But Mark Canha's older than Anthony Rendon, so cheap and efficient, good. Like he's the kind of guy that could be quickly in a bench role for Oakland. So I don't see a lot of long-term value there. Brady Singer's interesting, but not the kind of like frontline starter interesting that I would have looked for
Also,
as the main piece here. Plus, you're banking on long-term pitching, which adds a ton of risk.
yeah, and also just generally the flow in Dynasty and Keeper is that you want to the gold is young bats.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, went panning for gold with Anthony Rendon and came back with old and pitcher, which is the opposite of gold in fantasy and dynasty fantasy. So I would say that like yeah, I don't love that trade. I once had like a $62 Mike Trout in an auto new league, and I may not have gotten the greatest return. I got Roberto Osuna cheap, Vlad Guerrero cheap, like junior, and like two pitching prospects. So the gold was for me Vlad Guerrero, who I then turned around into something else, and the world turns on. But the point is that you gotta identify that gold, that one piece of gold that you're trying to get, and then you make them add stuff around it. So trading Rendon, probably a good idea. You probably would have had to do it in season, if not before the season. You do get a bunch of money, but money itself is, and this is on your specific thing, money itself is not that amazing because the drafts are not that amazing. They're filled often with mid 30s bounce back type players, which are not good bets. So the gold is still a 22 to 25-year-old young bat, and you just want to get that in every transaction you have, and otherwise keep Rendon and pay the money for the price, pay the money for the production.
Right. I mean, if this trade were Rendon at 39 for Nick Senzel at 5 and Brady Singer at 3, I could start to talk myself into it.
Like a bit better, yeah.
Because then you got a guy that you could see being on your team for several years, being pretty underpriced, doing a little bit of everything. Like that's more in line with where I'm at. I mean, how do you evaluate cheap points above replacement value guys like this? I just see them as highly replaceable. I don't see as much value in those players. Like even though the points per dollar look good, that's replacement level or near replacement level, and I'd rather have that higher value player locked in, knowing that if it doesn't work out with guys on the bottom of my roster, I can find someone else that brings comparable upside to a Canna or a Singer. Like those types of players enter the league pretty often, even in deeper auto new formats.
Yeah, I have like a super deep dynasty that I talk about sometimes on here, Devil's Rejects, and players like Andrelton Simmons, and we just took Hanser Alberto really late. Just players that will play, that might be landing in a good situation, might give you good points in a short term situation like that. They're yeah, a dime a dozen when it comes to dynasty, and they're not valuable in trades or valued in the draft. So they're fun to have, though. I mean, like kind of like this year will probably outproduce his $5 thing, but he won't have any trade value, and he maybe end up just being a cut in next spring or once they bring in another outfielder or trade him or whatever it is.
All that said, look, you're going to make mistakes when you're new to a format. It's okay. This one isn't
You
going to
also
ruin
get
you
Jester
forever.
King.
Yeah.
Instead of sending it to us, drink it.
Drink the Jester
Yell at
King.
us.
That's
and
the
curse at us.
that's the move in this case. We did have a question back at the beginning of the pandemic. We were talking about a website to order local beer from around the country. What's the latest with that site that you worked on?
Yeah, in the meantime, a lot of the states have, the state beer coalitions or beer associations have put up stuff where you can find which breweries are shipping in your state that way. So there's been some other things that have popped up, but we had, supportbeer.com, and you can search by state and find out which breweries are. You can click shipping in state, and you should be able to get a list of breweries that are shipping in your state. Otherwise, a place like Taver is pretty fun. That's a way that you can just order beer from all over the country to arrives in your mail. So That's Tavour. Pretty cool company.
It's Tavor. It's not Tavour.
Well, listen, I thought it was Tj. So
yeah, just TJ Anton is the interesting picture for
I thought
the
it was
Reds.
Tavor like Savor, but
Oh, I thought it was Devour like Devour, but I guess it could be both. Yeah, both
it's
are
probably
possible.
not Tj Anton. I apologize to Mr. Anton and his family.
That's that much we know is true. Second question: I recently bought both Urquidy and Framber Valdez in a Keep Forever Dynasty League thanks to Eno's discussions on the pod. Does this make me a perpetual league winner for the next 3 to 4 years? And why is that answer 100% yes?
Yeah. You've done it. Mic drop.
You got what you wanted.
Yeah, but I am doing, like I've said, I am kind of looking at pitchers with command as having a higher floor and maybe being more inning safe. So like the Alec Mills, JT Brubaker, Urquidy is like a little bit like that, but then also throws nasty stuff. So
Urquidy's getting some helium too, though. He's starting to creep up a little bit.
Sorry to anybody who already had him circled before I put my kiss of death on him.
Well, thanks a lot for the email, Baxter, and thank you for your email, John. As we said, enjoy that Jester King. No need to send it our way since we didn't approve of the trade that you sent our way. If you'd like to send us an email for a future episode, ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com is the best way to do that. On Twitter, he's at Saris. I am at Derek Van Riper. We've got our survey running. That'll be in the show notes. It's about all the podcasts we do here at The Athletic. If you take a few minutes to knock that out, we'd really appreciate your feedback. It'll help us make even better shows for you here on our network. If you have not signed up for The Athletic yet, you can get in for $3.99 a month, theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. Get Eno's pitching rankings, get all my rankings, get Jake Seeley's projections, get all the articles, everything in the draft kit included, plus, of course, all the team and league coverage you could possibly want, all for one low price. That is going to wrap things up for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.